Well, welcome everyone. It is Monday, March 1st, 2021. Welcome all to the Whitestown Redevelopment Commission meeting. First item on the agenda is a call to order. So Nathan, if you wouldn't mind taking us away.
Yes, Brian Brackmeyer.
Present.
Kyle Weathers.
Present.
Adam Hess.
Present.
April Wyckoff.
Present.
Clinton Baum.
Howdy.
Elizabeth Keith.
Here.
And Michael Berg.
Here.
Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So Glenn, if you wouldn't mind taking us away.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. Presentations, we have two lists on the agenda, but for the RDC 2020 financial data, we're going to go ahead and move that to the April meeting. So which moves us to item B, which is the REDI TIF impact on schools. So Parker, would you mind taking us away?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. First off, I think I've got the ability here to screen share. Let's see. You'd think I'd have all this down now with how long we've been in the Zoom world. Okay. All right, is this everyone good on the screen, everything?
We can see it.
All right, perfect. So again, like I said, good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Parker Criswell with REDI Financial Group. We're financial advisors to Whitestown Redevelopment Commission Board. This evening, on behalf of the RDC Board, I really want to cover this presentation that as Whitestown and as the community as a whole continues to grow, helping to just help clarify and help make sure everyone's on the same page as far as how is all this TIF development and how is all this development is impacting units and then specifically to schools and everything. So that being said, tonight, in order to quantify these impacts, I want to look at things through different scopes. First off, looking at from the level of extremely zoomed in and looking at maybe just one project in specific. And then at the end of the night, looking at as a community development as a whole, how is this impacting the units in the schools and stuff like that. So before I get into the really into the weeds and into the numbers of things, I think it'd be beneficial if everyone had an underlying of two large TIF concepts. These are, for the first one, we're looking at what's known as the but-for test. And really this test lies in just a question. And it can be seen down there in option one is, would development locate within the community without TIF? So as assessed value continues to come to the area and as developers and companies continue to come, would they have located within Whitestown or within the community as a whole, but for TIF? And so that's one concept to look at here. And then the second one is what's we've coined as TIF margin. TIF margin, simply put, is the fact that TIF generates revenues on a different formula and a different rate than all other underlying units. The big difference is when looking at cities, towns, counties, any other unit for that matter, they're constrained to a max levy. So as new assessed values come within the area, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's generating all new property taxes for those units. There is the constraint of you're not allowed to collect as much property taxes as somewhat's needed. Assessed values release, rates change as a result of that. Whereas TIF, they don't necessarily set property taxes. So in that case, there is no property tax impact because of TIF, but TIF's allowed to collect what turns out to be more revenues because of they don't have that max levy key component. So that being said, I really want to just dive right in. This is going to be as deep as we're going to get tonight. So bear with me here and we'll kind of get to this and everything. So on the left here, we see a document that was provided by Zionsville Community Schools. It's helping them quantify the Little League multifamily development that is currently on the table for on the west side of I-65 in Whitestown. top portion of this, we're kind of quantifying its property tax impact. And then there at the bottom, we're quantifying referendum funds impacts. And for the sake of this and for the simplicity of wanting to look at a bunch of numbers, I'm going to kind of simplify this down on this next slide. The only part I want to focus on is this top piece here. And we're presented with this question as what we kind of currently discussed is, how do we plug in TIF margin? How do we plug in this TIF margin puzzle piece into this when quantifying an impact from development? So instead of the assessed value coming on to the current rates and generating new property taxes, what would happen is this new assessed value would then help to decrease rates marginally. And then that turn, what that looks like is, so we now have a new taxpayer. We now have this new development paying taxes, but because the rates went down a little bit, now you have really everyone else paying less. So at the end of the night, it's new over here, decrease over here. So we have a bit of a washing effect, really. As far as the rest of this development goes, Zionsville continues to carry on and show increase from state funding from any new students brought about from the development. And that's pretty agreeable. The number that the state gives per student, it's per statute. So that number is easily quantified. It's at 113 there off to the right. And then finally, the referendum rate, again, it's a complete agreement on that. Whatever the current referendum rate is, that's assessed. There's no, that's exempt from TIF. And so any new assessed values that hit, be it TIF or not, the referendum rate is going to be able to collect on that. That being said, now that we've kind of covered the revenue side, I want to jump into the expense side of things really quickly. And here on the left, again, provided by Zionsville Schools, is we have 3 buckets of expenses. At the top, education referendum, it's operating referendum. Then you have operations fund expenses, then you have non-exempt debt service. Again, for the simplicity of things, whenever quantifying impacts, the top 2 items completely agree with, because we have this variable in the equation of if we gain 5 students, if we lose 5 students, that's going to immediately reflect the change to the expense from those top 2 buckets. Where we were presented with a slight difference here is this bottom bucket of expenditures, and it's where we're levying property taxes for debt payments. So that being said, if I have currently $500,000 in debt payments and this variable of student count because of a development comes to the area, it's not gonna, I still have to levy the same amount of property taxes regardless of this development. So that being said, we think for looking at a project specific impact, property taxes levied for debt payments shouldn't be included in here. So off to the right, we have a new expenditure and a new net impact calculated of right at about $3,000 of net positive impact. So at the end of the night, it's a bit of a wash. And I agree with that, is certain developments are going to bring larger net returns to certain units as it comes along. So now that we've kind of looked at it from 2 different points, it's just summarizing things really quickly. There at the top, we see what would be an option 2. So first of all, let's look at option 1. As we discussed earlier in the night, TIF margin or the but-for test presents 2 options. We can either TIF something or we can either not TIF it. As those have been discussing with developers and items and stuff like that, we know that there's a lot of circumstances where the development would simply not have happened but for the TIF. And so at the end of the night, there really is not an option 1. So looking at option 2, we have this green box at the top, it's TIF revenue collections. That's the amount that's being poured back into the community or given back to the developer as far as incentive goes. And then we see the net school position there, and then we have total revenues generated from the project. That's going to include state funding, school referendum taxes, and then TIF revenue collections. Again, like I was saying, that's what's being used to drive this growth and incentivize this development. So that was a lot there. That's about as deep as we're going to go tonight. Now, throughout the rest of this presentation, I really want to slowly back out and look at things from a lot more of a grandeur scale and show how different levels of development and different types of development impact to the schools different. So now, taking one step further back, we're going to be dropping in a little bit more of a different type of development into this impact analysis. So for instance, for this presentation, we wanted to use the home field multi-use development, this 200,000 square foot athletics facility the medical facility, retail space, a couple more apartments. You have single family residences, which are exempt from TIF. Those will not be TIF, and so they're able to be collected on by schools and other units immediately. And then public use water parks. All of that's going to be driving people to the community on the weekends, and items like that. It's providing what I call secondary development. So kind of skipping to the summary slide again. Again, we see option one. At the end of the day, it honestly doesn't exist, is because this development in specific definitely would not have happened but for the TIF incentives that the town of Whitestown are able to provide to this developer. So there on the right, we see that by using the same impact analysis as the first one, and then taking our assumptions and changing a little bit, we're left with these numbers over here to the right. So we can see that by increasing the scope of things and by looking at a slightly larger picture, we have a net school position of a positive $130,000. And then those two asterisks up there, you can see that there are certain parts of this development that are immediately going to be collectible by the schools. And so that's an even add, it's going to further add to that net school position. So again, now we're going to take one further step back and look at things from a Whitestown as a whole development. I kind of like this flow chart here, looking at things. We see on the left, we have TIF development. So these larger areas of TIF development, industrial parks, a couple of apartments in there, this multi-use development we just touched on, the Little League development, items like that. What those do is they make Whitestown and the community more of a incentive for people to locate there. So then you see major retailers, you see restaurants beginning to locate and further driving this non-TIF assessed values up. And then we also see items that are bettering the community that are able to be accessed. You see this connector route. You see various road improvements helping to the ability to build houses further out into the country or the county or whatever. Next, and then you look at school development. How is that next in line of things? So we see Whitestown's been able to provide for the schools within the area of adding crossing signals, of helping safety of the students there, helping add school resource officers to the schools in the area. Next, as mentioned, I'm going to take one final step back, and we're going to look at things from a community development standpoint of looking at from how is the entire community as a whole, TIF or non-TIF, benefiting from the growth that we're seeing within the communities. So we can tell that looking here from 2017, 2019, 2021, both Zionsville and Whitestown have both seen substantial growth over the past 4 years. And it's important to note that these assessed value pools right here are non-TIF. This is all not including TIF. We see Whitestown is generating a lot of their growth in 3% area, and Zionsville is generating a lot of their growth in 1% area. So what that means is Whitestown is able to grow the community in a different position than Zionsville is. So Whitestown is giving TIF incentives to drive their portion of the development or their growth, which is in 3%, which is commercial, which is job creating, which is bringing people to the community. And Zionsville is seeing this growth, or they're seeing growth and benefits in the forms of 1% growth, which is raising property values in homes or increases in homes, because now there's a larger demand there because these jobs that Whitestown's generating, now there's this demand there for those houses. And looking at things through a slightly different angle with this community development scope. Here at the top, we see TIF assessed value growth over 6 years. We see Zionsville, Lebanon, Whitestown, and Boone County are all growing at a very rapid pace over these 6 years. As we kind of just discussed, Whitestown's growing at a very quick pace because of the type of development we're seeing. The development that Whitestown's seeing is very TIF incentive heavy and would not be potentially happening at the same pace, but for a lot of the TIF. And then there at the bottom portion, we see this non-TIF assessed value growth. We see the Zionsville Civil Town, we see Whitestown Town, then we have Zionsville School Corporation, all of which are not being left behind by any means by all this rapid TIF growth within the area. As TIF grows and as TIF generates assessed value, it's also generating secondary growth, and it's generating growth in areas outside of TIF. A lot of the stuff that we discussed tonight is present time. It's where are we currently and how are we currently impacting. This presentation, this slide here is what we are required by the state of Indiana to give on an annual basis as part of the Redevelopment Commission's reporting requirements. It's showing the impact to the underlying units. As we discussed, there's not necessarily a property tax generation impact. Instead, TIF's impact comes in the form of circuit breaker. So as mentioned, if assessed values were released, rates would go down marginally, and that decrease in assessed value would decrease circuit breaker, allowing units to collect slightly more of their current property tax levy. So looking forward, and by looking forward, I mean is this scenario that we're painting here is if Whitestown's TIF further down the roads, once they're set to expire and all this TIF assessed value is released, what does that look like and how does that impact all the underlying units? So we see there on the right, we see Whitestown civil towns, just a couple of the highlighted ones. We see they're in the areas of 700,000, 600,000, and 50,000 as we continue downwards. Off to the right, we're looking at budgets and we're looking at how much truly is TIF impacting units as a whole. And at the end of the day, it's very marginal compared to the budgets that every unit is currently operating under. And then as we continue down that chart, we can see the total of the impact, and then finally what Whitestown's TIF is currently collecting that's allowing them to pour back to this in the form of incentives to further drive the growth of the community. And as we can tell, at the end of the day, the Whitestown's TIF is able to collect roughly $3 million more new revenues. And that's right there is what's helping Whitestown and helping the community grow at the pace that they're growing. So that really kind of sums up the presentation tonight, starting with looking at things from a project specific standpoint, and then zooming at things, looking at it from a whole of how, if we don't look at things just from one angle, we look at things from multiple angles, how TIF is providing alleyways for incentives and providing alleyways for benefit community growth from differences outside of just areas. So again, as it kind of says on this page, is let's move forward together and help fuel the community and help achieve it. So thank you. And that kind of concludes the presentation.
Parker, thank you so much. A lot of great information there in a short amount of time. First one to clarify, Elizabeth, apologize, Lebanon wasn't mentioned there as much. We were primarily basing an example off project over, what is it, in the rec site, the Millhouse development, which Michael and staff have been so gracious to follow up and share some of their notes and how that might impact the revenues for the Zionsville School Corporation. So wanted Parker to kind of walk through some of these scenarios and we can all have some open discussion about it too. But again, that was a lot in a short amount of time, but does anyone have any questions for Parker?
Well, I will just say thank you. Yeah, there's not a lot of specific Lebanon information in the report, which I was kind of hoping to see tonight, to be honest with you. You know, if there's information that we can provide as a district to help that process along, we would be glad to. But especially as we're seeing more development come into Worth Township, these are things that we would like to see. So I am a little disappointed that there's not more talking about us, but obviously if I can help facilitate that, we would love to do that if we can provide information. One specific chart you had was showing Zionsville versus Whitestown growth and the type of growth.
Yes.
That is something I would love to see Lebanon put into that chart and how Lebanon falls in that.
Certainly.
That would be great. But yeah, honestly, I see that the reports come from Zionsville schools. That's great. But we would love to work with you in the future to see some of those actual numbers for developments in Worth Township as well.
Elizabeth, thank you for the comments. You're absolutely right. I think this is actually a great time because Worth Township is going to experience some significant growth here in the near future. Mm-hmm. So if you or anyone else from Lebanon School Corporation would be interested in meeting with, representative from the town, someone from the Redevelopment Commission with Parker, and we can talk a little bit more about how, Worth Township is going to potentially be impacted positively, hopefully, by TIF in the future, and we can continue to partner. And we'd give the same offer to Michael and Zionsville School Corporation as well. If you want to take some of these initial questions offline, and we can hopefully find a way to work together.
Yeah, and we're excited about the growth coming. Absolutely. So we'd be glad to partner with you in that.
That'd be great.
I'd love to let Mike Schaefer is with us tonight. He's the CFO for Zionsville Community Schools. He's obviously far more expert on all of this than I am. If he has any thoughts, I'd love for him to have the opportunity to share them. We did just present about this at our recent school board meeting and had some discussion about this as well. So Mike, do you have some thoughts you'd like to share?
Well,
yes, thank you. And I appreciate the host unmuting me. I would say that number one, in all due respect, there are a number of statements that Mr. Criswell made I think we would disagree with. There are a number of other things I think require additional analysis. And so I would love to get a copy of this presentation and be able to work over it. And then perhaps sit down with Mr. Criswell and have a meeting, and then maybe after that we could kind of come back jointly and say, here's where we agreed, here's where we disagreed. Here are additional items that we think that the council would be well advised to consider. So we would be glad to do that. And again, I will say I cannot agree with everything we've just heard. There are things I do agree with, and there are other things I think are still open questions.
well, Mr. Schaefer is a Zionsville alum. Would love the opportunity to talk with you and others that you think are appropriate from Zionsville School Corporation, as well as Parker and some representatives from the town of Whitestown, because again, we're all partners in this area and want to make sure everyone is successful moving forward. So we'd love to take this and meet some other time, and whether that's going to be virtually or hybrid format or in person, we can decide that at a later note. But either way, we'd love the chance to talk with you all.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Just one other quick question. So in the comments about the commercial development driving jobs, I do see a lot of jobs being created. I don't see a lot of Whitestown residents or Zionsville residents working in Whitestown. And that's kind of anecdotal. Do we have numbers about, people that are moving specifically, I guess, to Boone County generally for jobs in Whitestown? Because I know that's often what I hear is we can't keep people in the jobs because it's not financially viable to live in the area based on the income of a lot of the type of development that we have right now.
Rachel User is online and with the Boone EDC, and they do have stats, and she can, if you guys want to speak, or if you want just some reports offline. That's kind of up to the board, but Rachel has messaged and says she can speak to and vouch to that if needs be. The EDC has done reports on it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about it if we have a minute now.
So we'll put you on the spot here, Rachel.
Hey, that's my job. So just for public record, Rachel Huser with the Boone EDC. Michael, that's a great question. And I will certainly pass along the data to really back up a lot of the information that I'm going to provide. With that, overall, for what we're projecting from a 2019 labor analysis, where we had an outside consultant kind of analyze overall our labor market here, and as well as our population growth and things like that. So for Boone County, we're estimating 30.4% to grow over the next 20 years population wise, definitely helping with both the available jobs here, as well as then an increase in the housing and residential areas. With that, we did see an increase. One area that the Boone EDC has been focusing on is really just focusing on that median wage growth. We did see it grow from, and I apologize, the data will definitely be able to state this, so this is off of memory, but about $17.50 in 2016 to $19.98 in 2019. So we're definitely hedging that median wage because, to your point, I mean, the median household income is over $80,000 in Boone County. So how can we create jobs here that work with our local residents who live here? And with that, one area that we were really excited to see is that prior to in our initial study in 2016 in our labor analysis, we had about 81% of local residents that lived in Boone County and commuted out of Boone County, and that dropped to 76% in 2019 when we did the labor analysis. So small change, but still a very good change that we're seeing. And as I say all of this, please take it with a grain of salt. This is off memory, but I would be more than happy to pass along those that labor analysis, both the 2016 as well as the 2019 updated. So you can take a look at that as well as to the RDC Commission as well.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Any other specific questions to Parker about how the TIF impacts the local schools?
No questions, Mr. President, but I do want to thank you for allowing the opportunity for this to be a discussion point. Working in finance, you become accustomed to differences of opinion and how numbers should be allocated and how things should be accounted for. So I do always appreciate hearing multiple sides of these numbers so we can have those discussions, as I appreciate your offering, so that Zionsville and Whitestown can get together and make sure the schools and the town are on the same page about what things are going forward. And to Mr. Schaefer's point, I hope we're able to all get on the same page, but there may be some things that agree and some things that disagree. And we're here to move forward for the benefit of all members of the community. So I do appreciate you taking the time today.
Anything else? All right. Well, Parker, thank you very much, and look forward to you sharing some more of that information with the RDC.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from our February 1st meeting. That should have been included in your packet. Everyone have a chance to review those, and if so, any questions, comments, concerns? If not, would entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Got a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Well, we'll give this one to Adam. Sorry, Kyle. Got a motion for a second. Any further discussion? So we'd like to go ahead and entertain a vote. So Nathan, would you lead us in a vote by roll call?
Brian Brackmeyer,
Yes.
Kyle Weathers,
Yes.
Adam Hess,
Yes.
April Wyckoff,
Yes.
and Clinton Baum.
Yes.
Perfect. Next item on the agenda is under unfinished business, which is a public hearing for the Bridal Oaks Economic Development Area. So I'd like to go ahead and open the public hearing. Nathan, did you get any requests by any chance?
I have not yet, and I have received none in chat either.
We'll go ahead and close the public hearing as I hear my kids screaming in the background. So moving along to new business. Item A is to consider adoption of resolution for Whitestown Bridal Oaks Economic Development Area, which is resolution 2021-6. Again, that resolution was in your packet. Nathan and or Dennis, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that? Because we've got another one coming up right after this.
Sorry, Dennis is.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, sure. Good evening, commission members and others who are joining us. We just had the public hearing on this. This is the establishment of an economic development area for the Bridal Oaks project. It's a TIF area. And at the last RDC meeting, you considered a declaratory resolution establishing this, and by statute, it has a process. It goes to the Plan Commission for approval, which it received, and then it goes to the Town Council for approval, which it received. Then there's a legal notice we have to advertise for a hearing, and a tax impact statement that is prepared by Reedy Financial Group that's sent out to the taxing units, and we've confirmed that that's all been done. So now that the hearing's been held, the last step in this process is consideration of this resolution, which is called a confirmatory resolution, which effectively confirms what you said when you created this area. And if you adopt this tonight, we will file it with Department of Local Government Finance and record it and file it with the auditor. And that'll complete the process for setting up this TIF area. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dennis. Any questions, comments?
Mr. President, I move the adoption of resolution number 2021-06.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Go ahead and Nathan, would you lead us in a roll call to approve resolution 2021-06?
Brian Brackmeyer,
Yes.
Kyle Weathers,
Yes.
Adam Hess,
Yes.
April Wyckoff,
Yes.
and Clinton Baum.
Yes.
Motion carries, and moving along right to the next step is item B, which is to consider adoption of resolution tip pledge, resolution for Whitestown and Bridle Oaks Economic Development Area, which is resolution 2021-07. And again, Dennis already explained the process, but any questions, comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2021-07.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, would entertain a vote by roll call to approve resolution 2021-07.
Brian Brackmeyer,
Yes.
Kyle Weathers,
Yes.
Adam Hess,
Yes.
April Wyckoff,
Yes.
and Clinton Baum.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving along, we have item C, which is a declaratory resolution for Whitestown Millhouse Economic Development Area, which is resolution 2021-08. Any chance to unmute Dennis or Nathan? Would you like giving a quick little overview?
Yeah, I can go in and Dennis can get more spec. This is breaking out. We did this as the Mauer TIF and created a large TIF area when we started the Mauer project. This is splitting it out into more defined. It's removing some pieces out of it and then isolating it two separate, this and the next, or splitting those TIFs into individual TIFs instead of just one large TIF that covered a bigger area. So it's freeing up spots that aren't part of this project and isolating the remainder of the Mauer ground, since that economic development agreement's still in the works, but it'll help us isolate as we do the project with Millhouse and Homefield to where it is a specific TIF that anything comes from instead of it being part of a larger TIF, and it won't give them access to those other TIF items. So Dennis can explain if there's anything I missed on that, but it's really just to clean up those TIFs.
No, Nathan, I think you said it well. I mean, it's interesting that this is really kind of being efficient. I like to view it with the town's TIFs. The Mauer area was created a while ago before the town bought the property, and was an expectation of development. And now that we're actually seeing where that development's being targeted, we're able to tailor the TIF areas precisely to where that area is and release the other properties so that it's not in a TIF area, that we don't need it to be in a TIF area. And, if something develops there, we can determine that later on. And this will help too, because we'll have the Millhouse TIF will go towards the Millhouse development in Homefield, which is a larger, and I would say a more complex project. It will help to house that TIF for the Homefield development. And it's really more into the weeds, but on the kind of the financing side, that this is very beneficial in the long run.
Thank you both. So this really covers items C and D. Any questions, comments? If not, would entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of resolution number 2021-08.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Would entertain a vote by roll call to approve resolution 2021-08.
Brian Brackmeyer,
Yes.
Kyle Weathers,
Yes.
Adam Hess,
Yes.
April Wyckoff.
He's muted.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yes.
And Clinton Baum.
Yes.
Motion carries. Similarly for item D, which is a declaratory resolution for Whitestown Homefield Economic Development Area, which is resolution 2021-09. Again, Nathan and Dennis just explained the reasoning behind this as well, but any questions, comments, concerns? If not, would entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of resolution number 2021-09.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
For a discussion? If not, entertain a vote by roll call to approve resolution 2021-09.
Brian Brackmeyer,
Yes.
Kyle Weathers,
Yes.
Adam Hess,
Yes.
April Wyckoff,
Yes.
and Clinton Baum.
Yes.
Motion carries. Clean sweep. Last item on the agenda is to discuss the 65 Commerce real estate property abatement recommendations. Within your exhibits should see the property tax application from Strategic Capital for prospective 3 developments coming up. But I'm assuming, Rachel, are you here to potentially discuss that?
Yes, thank you very much for your time. So to represent Strategic Capital Partners, this is phase 3 of 65 Commerce Park, which is one of Whitestown's newest industrial parks. Overall, Strategic Capital have been great partners, at least from the Boone EDC's perspective, and it's our pleasure to represent them tonight upon this recommendation of a 10-year real property abatement traditional form for Site 6, Site 7, and Site 8. For speculative construction basis. So with that said, because it is a speculative construction, we are not aware of the exact wages and or jobs that will come along with this. For speculative purposes, it was just focusing on the real property. So with that, Site 6, we're looking at a 286,000 square foot industrial building. For Site 7, and 286,000 industrial building as well. And then for Site 8, a 570,000 square foot industrial building. Overall, looking at what this looks like, so they're estimating for a real property capital investment of approximately $12.4 million for both Site 6 and Site 7. So that would be $12.4 million for Site 6 and $12.4 million for Site 7. If there would be the traditional real property abatement 10 years that we are recommending, that will leave a tax levy to the town of $1.59 million. And to the tax savings for the company of $1.56 million. That would be the same for the other site, Site 7. With Site 8, we're looking at an approximate real property capital investment of approximately $21.5 million. With the abatement, this would be a tax levy of $2.75 million and a tax savings to the company of $2.7 million. So standard or following other speculative constructions, this is the standard 10-year traditional real property abatement. Overall, the total capital investment equates to over $46.3 million for this third phase. Ultimately, this would bring to the town a tax levy of $5.94 million total, and what we're estimating of $5.83 million of tax savings to the company. So with that, happy to answer any questions or concerns that you have.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Considering at least in my opinion, I think economic development activity and prospective leads continues to be strong. Concerning these size of buildings, what type of users would you anticipate that could be a good fit for those?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. So I will say overall, last year we had about 20% that between 100,000 and 250,000. So although from that 250,000 is right outside of that 280, with that, just from a personal basis, when we would submit for those sites, we most definitely would include a 280,000 square foot building with that. Looking at our inventory, it is known that we do have a lot of the larger industrial buildings. With that said, Strategic Capital especially has been one of the most willing partners for leads coming in the door, as they are often open to both a lease purchase, a purchase to own, or a lease to own situation. So with that, although I won't speak specifically to these sites, at least in historically from our perspective, they have been great partners for us to work with because they are able to be flexible with those structures, which allows a lot more opportunity. That also goes with the divisibility of the buildings, which is always a good plus for these size buildings.
So speculative abatement is something that has been common practice for us. How helpful is it for you and the team as you're trying to entice new investment and job creation here in Boone County?
It's very important for us. And the reason for that is because with already a 10-year, with already existing real property abatements, essentially what we can do, even when we're just beginning to compete for leads in the very initial process, we can do what a calculation would be for a company should they choose to have that real property abatement and potentially pass through onto the company, which is a leg above other communities when they don't currently have that. Also with the speculative basis, you're able to really see where the area is lined out, and as well as where the infrastructure will be coming into the building. So because of that, because the plan's already drawn up, because the development plan is ready to go, it's a lot easier for us to market it on a lead by lead basis, and they can move quicker because you actually have a timeline of how long that the building is estimated to be completed.
Thank you much. One thing that this is an expansion of their existing park, which is already full, right? Do they have any vacancy in those existing buildings too?
Yes, so they have one vacancy currently. It's the building, or I'm sorry, two vacancies currently. Building 1, which is the 161,000 smaller building right beside Delco Foods. And then from my recollection, building 5 is not yet completed construction. And with that, it is currently being marketed. So building 5 and building 1 are currently being marketed. With that, of our inventory, they are definitely two that we are consistently discussing with leads.
I saw the aerial of where the site was going to be. I was a little surprised. I thought it was getting really close to that commercial ground. But Nathan, has it been through planning here recently for a rezone?
Yes, so the south section where building 6 and 7 went in October of 2020 to Plan Commission for a rezone. Got unanimous on that. There were some commitments with larger setbacks from 575, adding a fence, some extra site buffer. So that was all approved through Plan Commission to adjust the zoning to industrial for this. And then something else to speak on it, as we've been talking TIF, is they will be coming back to look at developer backed TIF bonds to reconstruct 575 and 500 South, which flows to Anson Boulevard. So there's some pretty heavy infrastructure improvement that's going to come with this project also. And 575 will eventually swoop to the new midpoint. So that'll be a heavy traffic flow area, and kind of the smaller 286, as Rachel said, that fits what we're trying to do as we get closer to the midpoint, is getting that smaller, going from the 600,000 square foot boxes down to something in between as we migrate into general business and commercial. So from our end, this fits with what we're going forward, and Plan Commission approved the rezone based on a lot of those conditions. And now it's in front of you for TIF approval or abatement approval, and then it will be back in the future to look at TIF approval for the road infrastructure improvements.
Don't see an existing resolution in front of this. Dennis's thoughts, concerns? I just see exhibits. Do we have a resolution?
Okay, can you hear me now? I thought we had sent a resolution to Savannah. But if it's not on the agenda and the commission does want to move forward with approval, and again, kind of the town's policy has always been that the RDC approves these as a recommendation to the council as kind of a
Right.
development body. I think you could just approve this on we could have it reflected on the minutes that you wanted a motion to approve the abatement application as presented and recommend approval to the council would be appropriate.
Thank you. Any questions for Rachel, Nathan, or Dennis? I'm questioned out.
Rachel, what's the current vacancy like in the Whitestown area for, the 300,000 square foot and less industrial user?
I apologize, Adam. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can certainly follow up. With that said, just thinking of existing buildings that currently are, we have that are stand alone. Less than 5. I would say, but
Okay.
that is a standalone less than 5 off of recollection. So I will certainly follow up after this conversation with those figures. I know there is a couple divisible larger industrial buildings that are being sublet right now, but of this size that are standalone, that would be fit more for that manufacturer entity. That is, I would assume, I'm going off recollection, less than 5.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
And just, I know other people probably know the answer to this, but access to these sites is only from the highway. It wouldn't be coming up any of the main arterial stuff. I mean, for like truck traffic and stuff like that, or because there's a new exit being built also, right? Somewhere in here.
Yes, the new exit is, so 575 will go down to 550. And that's the way we're going to divert traffic to go. It's not saying a truck can't get lost. Obviously, we've seen them in places they shouldn't be, but the intent is to use 575 as that north-south or and keep all industrial traffic west of 575 that's coming in from the midpoint. And that's why 500 will also tie in and then goes over and becomes Anson Boulevard and goes up to B450 east. So the intent's to kind of keep all that traffic within that mix area. And that's part of the 575 reconstruction plan from 400 down to the midpoint, is building it up to where it can be that flow out and keep all that large traffic in that vicinity.
So the goal is to keep it away from the neighborhood being built currently, correct?
Yes.
Because it's on the overhead, it looks like only half of, is that Emmons Creek right there that this would butt up against? That's kind of the neighborhood went over from Clark Meadows and above the Redwoods, or is that Redwood Apartments there?
I'm thinking that's an extension of Redwood, but I'm not. I'd have to double check and see, but I believe it's an extension off the back of Redwood.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Sorry.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. President, I just appreciate Strategic Capital. They've been, as Rachel said, great partners. Even in iterations of the founders of the company that were working with Whitestown before, they have been great to work with and have continued to be positive partners. And one of the things I like about this is the smaller size that we're getting down to. That's been something that we've been pushing towards, is to get away from having, even if they are divisible, the larger buildings, so we can encourage some smaller users to come in and continue to diversify our tax base to make sure that residents are protected from economic downturns in the future. So I look forward to seeing where this project goes.
Thank you. Anyone interested in a motion?
Mr. President, I make a motion for a positive recommendation to the town council on the proposed abatement schedule. Did I get that close to right, Dennis? Thank you.
I have a motion on the floor.
I'll second that. Oh.
For discussion? We'll go ahead and entertain a vote by roll call.
Brian Brackmeyer,
Yes.
Kyle Weathers,
Yes.
Adam Hess,
Yes.
April Wyckoff,
No.
and Clinton Baum.
Yes.
Motion carries. Is there any other business that needs to come forth the commission?
We should probably look at the April meeting because that's going to fall into spring break.
Good point. Currently scheduled for April 5th. Nathan, would you mind working with Savannah maybe to send out some dates or a doodle poll to ensure everyone can get that on their calendar for that next week?
Yeah, I'll look at both schools to see when their spring breaks are and see what we can put together.
And also, Elizabeth, Michael, would love to, also, would you mind coordinating with Nathan too? Would love to coordinate a meeting with both Lebanon and Zionsville schools, kind of discuss the tip impact as well too. And Parker, we'll make sure you're looped in that too.
Sure, that'd be great.
We get that presentation sent out maybe tonight or tomorrow. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll get that sent over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Kyle, on the date. Is there anything else? That would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I move we do now adjourn.
Have a good night, everybody.